Hi everyone, Adri here. You may have noticed there haven't been any new episodes recently for acciopolitics. There's a reason for that. Last month, my daughter tested positive for COVID-19, and then so did I a couple days later. Even though we were fully vaccinated, COVID really took us out for a while, me especially. It hasn't been easy to parent, work, and live as usual in the immediate aftermath of COVID 19. So, this is a friendly reminder to mask up, get your booster shots, and be kind to yourself. Thanks for your patience as I navigated COVID and parenting and work and everything else in my life. And now, on with the show. Hello. You're listening to Acciopolitics, a Harry Potter reread podcast that focuses on politics in the wizarding world. As always, I'm Adri, one of your hosts, and a recovering English major.
And I'm Helene, your co-host and producer.
Helene, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. Things are happening.
Things are happening indeed behind the scenes of this very podcast. But we can't talk about them right now.
Yes. Lots is going on, and basically my life is a bit chaotic right now, but it's kind of in a good way. So
It's a surprisingly good chaos, one would say.
yeah, at the moment, yes. Which I
We
will
will
take
see.
to the bad chaos any day.
I mean, yes. As your resident agent of chaos, I agree.
Right, exactly.
I read something today that said like your rising sign is the genre, like a kind of like a book genre of your life. Your
Okay.
sun sign is the type of like character that you are in your life, like the main character that you are in your life.
Okay.
And then your moon sign is like kind of like the energy that you bring to it. It was something like that. Let me find it because I cackled so much with mine. Like as I was thinking about
Interesting.
it. Because I was like, huh, interesting. Um, and your moon sign is your internal conflict, right? That you have like as a character. So for instance, my rising sign is Virgo. So
That's
as
my
a
sun
genre,
sign.
I know this is why we get along so well. As as a genre, I feel like Virgo is very much like nonfiction. My sun sign is Gemini, which is like my role as the protagonist would be the agent of chaos. And my moon sign is Scorpio, which is the internal conflict. And someone wrote in the comments that their moon sign was Scorpio, and so it was like, and everyone shall get their revenge. So I was like, yes, revenge is my love language. This tracks.
Oh
So
my gosh.
so
Yeah,
yeah,
well, my
my okay. Tell us yours.
yeah, well, my rising sign is Leo, so I feel like that's like real like main character energy.
Okay, so
Um
Leo. Genre of life would be like a romance
yeah,
for sure.
like just an adventure or something.
Yeah,
Um
but it's like all about you. So it's like romance adventure, like a fun. Yeah. Okay. Your
and
sun
then
sign is a
my
Virgo,
sun sign is Virgo, right? So
so
that's like
your role as the protagonist would be like she is an efficient boss lady from the city.
yes, perfectionist, clean, all the things that I like don't really identify with Virgo, like with myself for Virgo, but I
But
more
yeah.
identify with my sun sign or my rising sign than my sun sign, but that's a
Okay.
different.
Gotcha. Okay.
Uh, and then my moon is Aquarius, which I still don't know a lot about. Aquarius is still kind of a mystery to me.
Okay, we'll have to dig deeper on that later. But
Yes,
you know what's
yes,
funny that your sun sign is Virgo, my rising sign is Virgo. My sun sign, even though it's Gemini, was supposed to be Leo, which is your rising sign. So
oh my gosh, that's crazy. That would have been
because
a
I
weird
was
coincidence.
because I was supposed, I was a preemie. I was supposed to be an actual Leo as a sun sign, which I feel like if you truly know me, kind of tracks. Like I have
Yeah.
a friend who's a Leo, and she's like, "Bitch, I thought you were a Leo for the longest time," and I was like, "I know. I just have real
Yeah.
main character energy."
Yeah, I could see Leo, but I also like a Virgo rising for you makes so much sense to me, to be
Oh yeah,
honest.
yeah, but like as a sun sign, Leo
Yeah.
makes
No, that
sense.
that that
Like
also would make sense. Yeah. For me that would
yeah.
make sense.
But I feel also Gemini and Leo bring similar energies to the table.
Yeah, but Leo definitely gives more like Gryffindor vibes.
I mean,
Like
yes,
chivalry.
lion.
Yeah. Well, I think that was probably, yeah, probably a, what do you
Yeah.
call it, intentional on her part. But yeah, because really, honestly, when I think of a Leo, it's like it's really like true Gryffindor energy, to be
Oh
honest.
yeah,
So,
for sure, for sure.
which is why
Yeah,
Harry is a Leo. Harry is canonically a Leo. So,
correct. So
and
yeah, I
Hermione is
was
a Virgo, which makes so much
so
sense.
yeah, complete sense. So yeah, I just have those energies within me. So
Yes.
that's where we are.
Anyway, this has been astrology with acciopolitics.
So I don't know. Throughout this podcast, I just have become an astrology girl. You know, like
Yeah.
Catch Me season one. Adri was not an astrology girl.
Yeah, no, I think like my recent like my job that I have now, a lot of my coworkers that I'm close with are big astrology people, so I feel like it's just kind of seeped into me from
Yeah,
all
yeah.
those other people, and now I love it.
So this is what we call growth, I believe.
Yes. Everyone has an astrology girl deep inside that's just like ready to come
She's
out.
itching to get out and talk about her sun, moon, rising, and her Venus sign.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Well, other than being astrology girls, another thing we like to talk about in this podcast is Harry Potter and the Deathly
Yeah.
Hallows. Because
Literally why we're
today,
here.
what? We're not here just to talk about astrology. Trelawney's gonna catch us and she's gonna be like, "Excuse me, girls. This is my podcast now." Um, Chapter 24 of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, which is titled The Wand Maker. What happens in this chapter, Helene?
This is the one where, after Dobby's death, Harry digs the grave himself, and they have a proper burial for him to say their final goodbyes. Sad. As he's digging, Harry realizes what Voldemort's plans are and what needs to be done, so he goes back to the cottage and questions Griphook and Ollivander separately, accompanied by Ron and Hermione. They confirm his suspicions, and Harry explains to his friends that Dumbledore was the last owner of the Elder Wand and that Voldemort is at Hogwarts right now to take it from his tomb. Grave robbery.
It starts with a grave, it ends with a grave.
Oh my god, you're right. I didn't even
I
think
know.
about that.
This is this is the insight that you
It's like
guys tune in for.
the ring theory of just this chapter alone. That's crazy.
Yes. But before we get into the politics, one thing that I wanted to talk about, because it's not in my chocolate or my dementor or anything like that, is
Hmm.
I thought it was really interesting how when Harry is doing the manual and physical labor of digging the grave, he goes into like a meditation like trance. And I thought that was really
Mhm.
interesting. Like the whole like he's just like becomes a little bit, I mean, I wouldn't say zen, but like he just goes into like this
Well,
meditative
yeah,
state.
it talks about how like he finally learned to shut Voldemort out, and it only works when he's like in the middle of like some serious grief. Like it happened when Sirius died, and now when Dobby's, like when he loses Dobby, that's when he's able to truly shut Voldemort out. Which
Hmm.
I read that and I was like, I think I knew this on some level, but like this is not like made a big enough deal. Like this is like I did not remember this very well as being like a thing.
Well, the thing about Voldemort, right, as we know, is that he cannot understand love. And what is grief if not love
Love
persevering?
persevering. Yes. Honestly, though, that was a perfect use of that quote.
I mean, I have been sitting on this the entire time you've been talking.
That's amazing. No, I love it. Thank you so much for that insight. But and one thing I wanted, so hard turn for a second. One thing I wanted to say before we started talking about the politics, before I forget, because I also don't mention this later, is so last chapter is obviously the chapter where Dobby like actually died, but this is the chapter that they like mourn him, and
Hmm.
I every time I've read this book, I have not cried for Dobby. Dobby has never been my favorite character. Like, I don't dislike him, but he kind of bothers me. He's kind of annoying sometimes. And I never really got like a super deep connection with his character, like, really cared about him that much. Sorry if that's controversial. So I was shocked when I was reading this chapter last night for this podcast, and I cried while they were while they were burying him. I cried. When Luna started talking, I cried. Like,
Look who grew a heart.
I know, I was like, "What? I'm crying for Dobby? What the fuck is going on?" Like, I
Also,
didn't ever
okay,
expect it.
like, I feel that your inability to love Dobby is mostly like Chihuahua slander because you hate like a small, slightly
No,
annoying, big eared good boy, you know?
no, no, not at all. No, I think they're very different. I just like Dobby really annoyed me in Chamber of Secrets, like so much with like
I
his
mean, yeah, he was not written the best way,
yeah, and
I
he
will
well
admit.
he just doesn't go about things very smartly. That was a really well worded word that I just used. Um in that book. It's just not great. I just didn't like it. I was like, you're being annoying. Leave my boy Harry alone. Let him go to Hogwarts. Whatever.
He had good intentions though, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was just like quite an annoying method of getting those intentions across. Uh,
Well, okay. Now that we are going to move on to the politic,
yes.
I, Helene, you already know this because we've been texting about it, but now is the time, and it happens at least once every season where we have been doing these politics separately, where Helene and I just stumble upon the same politic, and there's no other politic to choose for us personally. So we're gonna have the same politic today, and I think because Helene, you did a very deep dive into like what this politic means. I think that you should go first because you have like the main definition, and then maybe I could go second because I came
Yeah.
across like a really interesting, I would say, paragraph about this in a book.
Yeah, totally. I think that works for me. So, the politic that we both chose this chapter is oppression. And oppression is a form of injustice that occurs when one social group is subordinated while another is privileged. And oppression is maintained by a variety of different mechanisms, including social norms, stereotypes, and institutional rules. Um, and I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial here, but
Okay.
I'll explain myself. Um, I think like we see a form of what I would label as oppression Olympics in this chapter. Um, when Hermione tries to convince Grip Hook that they care just as much about the injustice against his race as he does. And she cites like the fact that she suffers similar prosecution under the current regime, and cites all these things that they've done that she feels illustrates how much they care about the cause that about his cause, about the racism that he has experienced himself.
Well, and it's funny that you should like point out that is because my quote kind of gets into this a little bit. But one of the things I want to talk about Hermione pointing out, like all the things that they have done, they do not mention one thing that they have done for goblins
No,
at
they
all.
only talk about house elves. Yeah.
Exactly, which is like you are. pointing to a different oppressed group and saying, I care about their plight, so therefore I must care about yours, which is not the same at all.
Yes. And the reason I say that I think what I just said was a bit controversial uh is because oppression Olympics can be seen as it's very, it usually has a negative connotation, and I want to say that I don't think that that was Hermione's intent, to be like, oh, I have it worse than you do. I think Hermione was saying that she has it the same or sometimes worse than Griphook does, just literally as a way to illustrate like a reason why they would care as much about that cause as he does, and like why they are the wizards that care when he thinks
Yeah,
that
but
no wizards do.
it, see, the thing is with that, and we can probably just talk hours and hours about this, is that her argument, like, don't get me wrong, Hermione is one of my favorite characters,
Yeah.
like, till the end of the earth, honestly. But this is a big but. This is not a convincing argument for me
Yeah.
because like, you can't, like, say, "Oh, I have it the same, but also I get to use a wand," and his whole point was, "We can't use wands, and this is, like, something that has
Honestly,
been."
yeah. I have something I want to add to that, but
Yeah,
before I do, I just want to just define my terms, because that's what I like to do, and just
yeah,
give a definition of what oppression Olympics means, just so people are all on the same page.
yeah,
So the definition of oppression Olympics is a characterization of marginalization as a competition to determine the relative weight of the overall oppression of individuals or groups, often by comparing race, gender, socioeconomic status, or disabilities in order to determine who is the worst off and the most oppressed. So
mhm,
that's what we mean when we're talking about oppression Olympics. And honestly, I think I see Hermione's argument very similar, like to something that I've actually dealt with many, many times in my own life. Um, when people try to compare my lived experience as a Jew with the Black American experience, because if you're looking at it, like, both technically um, experience racism to a degree.
mhm,
Um, However, I take issue with that, because I don't see Judaism as a race. It's a religion. You can choose to be Jewish. You can't choose to be Black. That's a whole thing. I've talked about it, I'm
yeah,
sure. Um,
correct.
but most people say that Judaism is a race, and that being anti-Semitic is being racist. That's a whole thing. Um, I'm not those people. Just putting it out there. But it would be like me as a Jew saying that I experience just as much, if not, sorry, one second. Siri is really messing me up right now. That I experience just as much, if not more, like oppression
Mhm,
and racism as a Black person in this country, which is just not true to any
yeah,
extent. And I feel like that is kind of what Hermione is saying, because she does experience racism, being a mudblood. That is true, but it is in no way on the same level as what Griphook experiences, because she is allowed to have a wand. She passes as a wizard.
yeah,
She is on this level of privilege that Griphook can never in a million years achieve, no matter what he does, because he was
yeah.
born a certain way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's
so
exactly, and that's what exactly what I was like, I was saying, like, that argument of hers doesn't pass the smell test, right?
right,
Because
yeah,
not only is she equivocating, even when she talks about house elves, like a different, like, magical creature slash race with grip hooks. Like, no, just because you care about the plight of, like, uh let me be like, I'm gonna say, like, in the like, in the American consciousness, like, there's like, oh, I can't be racist against Black people because I'm Latino. There are definitely anti-Black
yeah,
Latinos, right? Like,
yeah,
or
yeah,
I can't be racist against Native Americans. I'm Black. You can definitely have privileges against Native Americans and be Black. Like, there's no, like, just because you care about one. group
Yeah.
of marginalized and oppressed people doesn't mean you definitely care about all of them.
Right. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
or that you're free from prejudice, right? So that's why to me it doesn't pass the smell test. Anyway,
No, totally makes
but
sense. Yeah.
to kind of continue the discussion about oppression Olympics and oppression, I found a book called Political Sociology: Oppression, Resistance, and the State by Davida Sulfan Glassberg and Derek Shannon. And it says the following, this one little paragraph that I could find that succinctly talked about what I wanted to bring into the conversation.
Okay.
Systems of oppression are not isolated from one another. Systems of oppression intersect in significant ways, forming a complex matrix of domination. People do not experience, for example, their gendered oppression one moment, their racialized oppression at another, and their class oppression at yet another. Rather, people live in their respective statuses of oppression simultaneously. So, for
Damn.
example, an individual is not a woman at one time during the day, white at another, and later middle class. That individual lives as a white middle class woman every moment of every day. As such, the intersectionality of multiple systems of oppression forms status inconsistencies so that an individual may be advantaged on some dimensions of this complex matrix of domination, but disadvantaged on others. In the case of the hypothetical person here, she is advantaged in the dimensions of her class and her racialized group membership, but disadvantaged in the dimension of her gender.
I have never thought about it this way. This that like kind of like low key blew my mind a little bit.
I heard you go like, "Oh shit."
I was like, damn. Like that speaking truths. I mean, yeah. I mean,
So like
it begs a like a really interesting like
so when people talk about like intersectional feminism, for example, right? Like what
yeah,
they mean is that like you cannot say you cannot say feminism to encompass like just white women, right? Like yeah, but there are
white
other
cis
women.
women.
Yeah, white cis women, right? Like there are other women out there and their plight is as important, if not more sometimes, because depending on the dimension of the oppression, right?
Right.
So like we often have this kind of like two-dimensional view of a person, like, oh, they're, I don't know, a white woman, like a Karen or whatever, but like what social class is this person, right? Like they have different plights if they're like at a lower class than if they're middle class or very wealthy or even like Paris Hilton rich, right? So they will have different experiences moving through life,
Yeah.
even as a woman, because of their social status.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they stop being a woman. It's just that you have to take into consideration like the holistic approach. Like
Right.
sometimes like that white woman might be disabled but have access to better forms of moving through the world because of their social class and standing. And they might have been born cisgender, right? Or they might be a white trans woman who is disabled moving through the world at the same level of social standing, right? All things being equal except for the fact that it's a
They're
trans
transgender.
woman, right?
Yeah.
then then that person experiences potentially more oppression because of the norms of society than the other person. So like that's where it gets a little muddy, right? And that's why oppression Olympics becomes such a like divisive thing, because we stop we want to make things easy for us, right? Like the brain tries to distill everything to the easiest conclusion, and the
Yeah.
reality is so varied and so complex that we don't want to have to wrap our minds around it. We want the easy answer.
Yeah, I think that like just the two of us like in general, like take us for example, we're really good well, not really. We're a decent example of this because, like, I know in my example earlier, I said a Black American, and then me
Hmm.
a Jew, but like you also experience racism, and it's to a different degree, and there's different histories that go into like the things we experience because neither of us are considered like white American like women.
Yeah, not in like the Protestant
Yes.
white American
Yeah,
mindset,
I am
right?
white. I will say I am white, but and as I said, like I don't believe Judaism is a race, but the majority of people say that Judaism is
Oh,
a race,
well, but the
including my
thing is,
family. So
so here's the deal, like, Helene, the thing is that I am a white passing
yeah,
Latina, right? And I don't have a heavy accent, right? And even though I am white passing, a lot of people have labeled me. I did not label myself for a
Av
long
was
time
white.
as this.
Yeah.
No, as a person of color.
Oh,
I never, before moving it to the mainland, I never felt like a person of color because I lived in an island where, yes, there is racism and colorism, whatever you want to fucking call it.
yeah.
It's the same as in the mainland, right? But like I lived in the island as a typical, I guess, criolla or like Creole, like white looking person, right? So like I didn't think of myself as a quote person of color. When I moved to the mainland, my professor started calling me person of color, and I was super confused
Interesting.
for a very long time. And I was like, person of color, what? Like, I'm not
Yeah, I mean, it's like when people tell me that my race is Jewish, and I'm like,
correct.
my race is white, dude. Like my religion is Jewish. So
Correct. So, like, you're just
yeah,
like, if the majority of people are labeling you a certain thing, then the perception becomes reality in a way, right? So, like,
yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't matter that I can say like, well, I'm a white passing Latina, and some people label me as quote racially white, right?
Mhm.
But some people are like, no, one drop of whatever you have in your ancestry makes you a person of color. So like it's a mixed bag. Sometimes it depends on where I'm moving, not just in society, but in like a state, whether I get called person of color or not. So like that's what I
Interesting.
mean by like layered, right? So like
Yeah,
even in
totally.
like whatever region you're in would determine your definition, I guess.
Yeah.
So like you and I are, I think, are a good example of like different levels of oppression, right? Like and not to, I'm not going to say here like who's oppressed less or more, like I'm not talking about that, but
No,
like
yeah.
how we move through the world is different, right? Like you're in Minneapolis, that means something different to you, like to as a white presenting, if you want to call it that, like, or as a white woman of Jewish like religion, like
Yeah,
moving through Minneapolis,
yeah,
um, fairly like middle class, right? Like you had access to education, you have like your bachelor's degree, and like you move through Minneapolis in a certain way, whereas I
totally.
move through Texas in a certain way. Like with like my Latina heritage, even though I'm still white passing and stuff. Like
Yeah,
if someone hears me speak Spanish in the grocery store, I might be like, not that someone's gonna like lynch me, but like I might get some stares. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
try not to like whip out my Spanish at all in public, right? Unless I'm in like in a Mexican grocery store, in which I'm like, yeah, I'm among the friendlies, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Or like in a Latin American grocery store, in which I'm like, yeah, like they're not gonna care that I speak Spanish.
Huh.
But it's how I move through like even like different grocery stores is like part of the layered experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a big old lasagna of oppression.
Lasagna. Yes. I like how you went with lasagna, not cake.
I mean, lasagna is just better at layering. Cake can be layered or not, I guess.
Yeah, lasagna sounds good now. Now you're making me hungry for lasagna.
I honestly now want lasagna. That's how I'm at. That's where I'm at. But
Yeah.
in this chapter, how we can see oppression. Let's talk about how we can see oppression in this chapter before we get to our quote. Um, I think like even the fact that here lies a free elf is like a nod to oppression in the wizarding world. The fact that we even call it the wizarding world and not the magical world is also
Ooh,
a sign
yeah.
of oppression.
That's a good point. Yeah. It's also patriarchal because it's
Oh,
not the witching world.
oh, now from now on, we're just gonna call it the witching world,
I mean, I'm here for it. I want to live in the witching world.
the witching bitching world.
Yeah,
Anyway,
you're witching, girl.
oh my god, I love it. Obviously, the whole thing with Grip Hook, which we'll get into soon, I'm sure, it was like the biggest like marker for me of oppression
Yeah, same.
in this chapter. Ron's like being uncomfortable when Hermione's like, "We also want to free the elves," and Ron's like, kind of
Well, yeah,
shifting
I
next to
kind of,
her.
well, I read that as like, I'm ashamed that I was not on board with that right
Oh
away.
yeah. Yeah. No, I know, but like that's also kind of like how oppression is kind of codified into the witching
Hmm.
world. Because
Make this a thing.
yeah, no, so a listener's gonna be like, "Stop trying to make witching world a thing. It's not a thing."
Oh, it's a thing. It's
Oh,
a
it's a
thing.
thing. I'm Gretchen Wieners, and this is my message. The Where was I going with this? Okay, so even like how codified it is, and the other thing that also made me feel about how codified it is in the witching world, like this oppression of other magical beings, is how Ollivander not ever once says, "Yes, other magical beings could definitely use wands," but like they no, he's just talking about like witches and wizards using wands, and like there's
Yeah.
like no reference to other magical beings potentially being able to channel their magic or energy
Yeah.
through an instrument.
Yeah, I feel like it really isn't until this chapter where we see just the act of being able to have and use a wand as a privileged experience. Like
Yeah,
it's something that we as humans like have taken for granted while reading this book because like obviously when we're reading the book we're going to identify with the human creatures because we are human, and I don't think a lot of people would think about these things in the perspective of like a goblin or a house elf. I mean, if you do, that's super interesting to me and I want to know what that was like, but like I doubt people really thought about it as like, oh, why can't a goblin have a wand? Like,
yeah,
why is it?
exactly. And like they can't even hold positions in the Ministry of Magic, really.
Yeah, no,
Like
I
so
mean, like,
there's
and like house elves are only used as servants. Like, it's a whole thing. Like, they can't.
so there's no representation, of other magical beings and the witching world
We are making this a
politics.
thing. We are making it a thing, and if I have to die on this hill, I will die.
This is the hill acciopolitics ends up dying on.
Yes, it is the witching world.
Oh, now a man's gonna say this is oppressive because we're calling it the witching world.
All right.
Okay. But yeah, so I feel like the person who seems to be not like super like woke or whatever, but you know, but not aside from Harry, Ron, and Hermione, it's like Bill, who's like, I mean, we can't go to work, but I mean, there's bigger stuff going on in the witching world than just going to work and earning
Yeah,
money.
I mean that was a little like shocking to me. Not shocking, I guess surprising, because like the Weasley family has always been known for like not being very wealthy and like relying
Correct.
on money. a lot because they just don't have a lot of it. So Bill being able to like throw away like, oh, we're not allowed to go to work right now, but like there's more important things going on. It's like, yeah, but like how are you making a living? Like how are you living right now? Like how are you affording food? How are you like
Yeah,
that's
that to me that makes absolutely no sense. Like if I didn't have a job, I don't know how I would be living day to day. So
yeah, I was like, what is he doing? Taking like a metal detector out on the beach at Shell Cottage and finding spare coins in the sand? Like, is that literally what he does with his day? Like, I don't understand what else he could do.
but also like you can't just magic food out of thin air. So like how are you eating?
Yeah, maybe they like eat until their last crumb because like you can multiply food,
Yeah.
right? You
Okay,
can make
so
food from more food. So they eat a little bit and then they just make more of it before it's gone.
they do a Jesus with the loaves and the fishes is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I just call
Um,
back to an earlier episode of
or they
acciopolitics.
literally just fish because like they're on a beach. So
Or like Akio fish. Got it, babe.
well, that's
Done.
probably like the easiest way to do it. That'd be nice. Um,
I got it, babe. Caught a big one. Akio shark.
Accio whale, like
Well, this this newest edition of Moby Dick is a very quick.
yeah, yeah, it's impressive.
It's a pamphlet. It's a pamphlet, not a book.
Should
All right,
we?
let's get into the quote because I
Okay.
could talk about this all day, and then people are be like, this bitch is not only trying to make witching world happen, she has book jokes for days.
Hell yeah! And Witching World is happening. I'm sorry. Become okay with it. Do you want me to go first with my quote?
Yes, I'm waiting for you. Yes.
Okay, so it's a long one. Uh, it was even longer, and then I shortened it because I was like, I cannot read for this long. So, buckle in. The right to carry a wand, said the goblin quietly, has long been contested between wizards and goblins. Well, goblins can do magic without wands, said Ron. That is immaterial. Wizards refuse to share the secrets of wand lore with other magical beings. They deny us the possibility of extending our powers. Well, goblins won't share any of their magic either, said Ron. You won't tell us how to make swords and armor the way you do. Goblins know how to work metal in a way wizards have never. It doesn't matter, said Harry, noting Griphook's rising color. This isn't about wizards versus goblins or any other sort of magical creature. Griphook gave a nasty laugh. But it is. It is about precisely that. As the Dark Lord becomes ever more powerful, your race is still more firmly above mine. Gringotts falls under wizarding rule, house elves are slaughtered, and who amongst the wand carriers protests? We do, said Hermione. She sat up straight, her eyes bright. We protest, and I'm hunted quite as much as any goblin or elf, Griphook. I'm a mudblood. Don't call yourself, Ron muttered. Why shouldn't I? Said Hermione. Mudblood and proud of it. I've got no higher position under this new order than you have, Griphook. It was me they chose to torture back at the Malfoys. As she spoke, she pulled aside the neck of the dressing gown to reveal the thin cut Bellatrix had made, scarlet against her throat. Did you know that it was Harry who set Dobby free? She asked. Did you know that we've wanted elves to be freed for years? Ron fidgeted uncomfortably on the arm of Hermione's chair. You can't want you know who defeated more than we do, Griphook. End scene.
I mean, talk about talking for a character.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like
That
the
just
part
made me more uncomfortable than like the first time I read it tonight.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the part that I had included originally that I ended up cutting out because it was too long was that at the beginning where Griphook kind of explains what a wand carrier is.
Mm-hmm,
Um
mm-hmm.
and like Harry like hears the word and he's like wand carrier, like that's a weird phrase.
That's a weird
Um
phrase to use.
Yeah.
We prefer the term witch or wizard.
Yeah. But like that term wand carrier, like it it displays the witch or wizard's privilege in a way that witches and wizards are not comfortable with, which is why it hit
Yeah,
Harry wrong. He didn't
yeah.
realize that that's why it hit him wrong, but it calls out his privilege, and calling out anybody's privilege is going to make them feel uncomfortable, which is why critical race theory is such a divisive thing in our country, because they don't want it to be taught in schools because it makes the white kids and the white teachers and the white parents, honestly, feel uncomfortable with being white. And it makes them
Because it
feel like the oppressors, which they are, but they don't want to be reminded of that.
Well, it makes them see themselves in a lens that is uncomfortable for them
Exactly.
to look through, which is the lens that people that are not in the same privilege spot see them through, right? So it's like
Right.
having to, as a person, right, like people who are oppressed have to see the world a lot of times through multiple lenses, right? They have to see it through theirs, through their oppressors, to like just to survive, honestly, right?
Yeah.
But people in privilege have the privilege of just looking at the world through their own lens and
Yeah.
not deviating from that. And that's what makes people uncomfortable, is to now later in life having to be confronted with the fact that you're, one of the things that privilege affords you is only having to think about your own lens rather than having to, or being forced to, for survival, to consider other lenses.
Yeah. And unfortunately, growth only ever comes from looking inwards, and being and feeling that uncomfortable feeling, and like embracing it. And if we don't do that, we're never going to grow. If we just ignore it and pretend that, everything is fine, we're never going to become the people that we need to be. So,
Well, the thing is, like, all kind of growth is very uncomfortable, right? Like,
yeah,
if you feel very comfortable, you're not really growing. And
right.
one of the things that I feel like, and you don't have to be a mom to see this, obviously, but like that motherhood has really, really taught me, as seeing my child grow, has been that like physical growth, just like emotional growth, is painful for my child. Like every time she goes through a growth spurt, there's like a little bit of
Yeah.
tantrums, like crying, like because she's in like
Teething,
physical pain.
teething for
No,
sure is a thing.
teething for sure. But also even like the, like, the elongating of her body is painful.
Yeah.
Um, she's learning right now how to stand up, and that has been painful for her. Like there's a lot of like, she like falls
Because you have to
off, where
fall.
you have
Yeah.
to fall, yeah. Her legs are not strong enough to hold her.
Yeah.
We're not strong enough to hold her entire weight
Yeah.
until fairly recently, and even now she still has to like hold onto something so that she doesn't like fall on her butt, right? So like, and it's taking like weeks for her to do something that I take for granted.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and thinking about it, like at first she couldn't even hold up her head, like now she sits up unprompted, from like she can be laying down, now she can sit up, right? And it's like, oh yeah, like 9 months ago she couldn't even lift up her head on her own, right? And so that was a process of growth that came with like pain and struggle, and that's just physical growth, right?
Yeah.
Mental and emotional growth comes with a lot of mental and emotional pain and
Yeah.
struggle, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's not worth it.
Exactly. Yeah, and one other thing before I move on to your quote, which I'm very interested to hear, one other thing I wanted to call out that kind of stood out to me in this quote, other than obviously all the things that we already touched on, um, was when Hermione reclaims the term mudblood for
Yeah.
herself. I thought that was just really interesting. And I could see that the author was trying to do something with that there.
Yeah.
Make a social commentary of some sort. And I don't know,
I
it's
don't think
part
it's as powerful as she meant it to be.
yeah, I was gonna say it's like it's part empowering, but also part if it wasn't in the context of her trying to prove to Griphook that she's oppressed just like he is, and therefore she
It
feels
would be way more empowering.
yeah, it would be more impactful, I think. But like because it comes so close to this line where she says it was me they chose to torture back at the Malfoys. Like that's the line that really stands out to me as oppression Olympics.
Well,
Because
also, like, girl, they chose you because it seemed like you had the most information to impart.
yeah, I mean she's obviously leaving out a ton of context there as well, like that. But like reading it, it's like, okay, so yeah, she makes a good point. She, as a mudblood, also experiences racism and prejudice. And it wasn't until she said, like, it was me they chose to torture, that was where it was kind of like, okay, now she's trying to show that like she has it worse than him sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Other like up until then it was kind of like she was kind of keeping it at that level of like you're oppressed and I'm oppressed, even if it's in different ways, we're both oppressed, right? And I'm not saying mine's worse or yours is worse. Like I'm just saying that I also experience oppression. But then the
Mm-hmm.
second that she like brought in that, well, it was me that they chose to torture back at the Malfoys, and it's like it wasn't you, it was me, right? It's like, okay, like what are you trying to prove with that? And so I feel like that just kind of made her, reclaiming
Well,
of the term mudblood kind of
she's also
cheapened.
taking one instance and
Yeah,
extrapolating it into like, well, this is always the case, when it might be just like a circumstance by circumstance thing.
yeah, yeah. So those are just some of the highlights of this long quote, but there was a lot to unpack in it for sure.
Because, like, I could feel like Gribhook could be like, yeah, and I could only fucking work at Gringotts. So what? Like,
Yeah, like you don't know it yet, but you're gonna become the fucking minister of magic. I'm never gonna have that opportunity. So shut the fuck up,
yeah,
Hermione. Like
like, yeah, la di da, you went to Hogwarts, and I, like, my career prospects are like
banker.
metalsmithing or working at, like, Gringotts. Boo
Yeah,
hoo.
yeah. Griphook
The
had
world
the
is your oyster.
yeah, Griphook could have gotten a lot more nasty than he did get in this, and he could have come back with a lot more that he held back. So,
I feel it's more because of an oversight by the author, but we'll just, you
oh
know.
yeah, 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 for sure.
Okay, so my quote is not between the like whole grip hug situation, which I thought was very interesting. But then I saw your quote and I was like, well, I have a backup. So no worries.
Good.
So, okay, so I'm going to set the scene. This is after like Ollivander like talks to Harry and tells him, hey, Voldemort's gonna, go after the Death Stick because he wants this power, like, oopsie. Um, so this is what Harry is thinking, okay? Harry was suddenly reminded of how unsure, when they first met, of how much he liked Ollivander. Even now, having been tortured and imprisoned by Voldemort, the idea of the Dark Wizard in possession of this wand seemed to enthrall him as much as it repulsed him. Now, what this quote showcases is how oppression is just a part of the fabric that makes up the witching world. Ollivander
Sorry.
talks about wands. Stop giggling
I'm
when I say
sorry. It's
witching
like
world.
it tickles me every single time you say it. Sorry, go on.
um, so Ollivander talks about wands as if they are only usable by wizards. Like it's a foregone conclusion. So his fascination with like all things like Voldemort in terms of his power and his mastery of the skill and the wand, right? Like when we think about like book one of like he did terrible things. Great, but
Great, but
terrible. Yeah,
terrible. Yeah,
whatever. Yeah, like he did great things. Terrible, but great, or whatever. It's
yeah.
like, man, give it a fucking rest. Like, he killed someone. Stop, like, it's like if someone was like, "Ugh, that kid, he like mass murdered, like, whatever with an AR-15, but what a sight it was to behold. Come
But
on, man.
he had such great aim. Like his aim
Like,
was so cool. Like
terrific. Psh, chef's kiss.
yeah,
Like,
that's what it reminds me. I always thought that Ollivander was written very like strangely as a character.
so, but what a flair he had with that AR-15. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And like it always kind of threw me off that he without fail refers to Voldemort as the Dark Lord.
Ugh,
And I will say
gross.
like Grip Hook does that as well in my quote, which I don't fully understand. Um as someone who is very highly oppressed by him and has no privilege in the eyes of Voldemort, I'm surprised he doesn't take like a Harry stance and just call him Voldemort. Or
Well, he can't because of the taboo.
well, yeah, but then like you know who or something, you know? I
Yeah.
just feel like Dark Lord is like a term that only people who revere him to a certain extent use.
Okay, so the way that Ollivander is like kind of fetishizing like the power aspect of this,
Yeah.
um, is not unlike like what like good people, quote unquote, have like when they have like a fascination with the
True
people
crime.
who have power or like through oppression, like let's say
Yeah.
like people who are like, oh, I don't like that Donald Trump, but he sure does tell it like it is, and I respect him for
Ooh.
it.
Ooh, that ooh. That hits. That hits.
Too close, right? But
Yeah.
and it's like, don't you see like the people who have like this power hold this power like upon the bodies of those that they oppress, kind of like that statue in the Ministry of Magic, like in the Ministry.
Yeah, the Magic is Might statue. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like literally witches and wizards standing upon other
They're
magical creatures,
they're oppressed.
their
Yeah, the people they
thrones, yeah, that they're oppressed. Like that always comes back to me as imagery of like all of like what that this magical I don't know, like that this magical kingdom or whatever, like the ministry or even the witching world as a whole and like globally is presumably built upon oppression.
Yeah. I didn't giggle that time. Just so you know.
Yeah. This
I'm
is what we call
normalizing
growth
it.
and process.
I'm learning to
Progress.
normalize it. Yes.
Progress.
Um but no, you make some good points for sure.
All right, so let's talk about the character who you thought was the politics of oppression in this chapter, or about it the most.
Yeah, I mean, I went with Grip Hook. Obviously, I was between Grip Hook and Hermione, but I think that Grip Hook would be the correct answer here because he is oppressed but doesn't like fight the oppression Olympics back when like he doesn't take the bait when Hermione does her thing, right? And I think that that's the sign of someone who has kind of accepted where they like what their situation is and isn't going to argue with someone that that's not going to be able to see it the way that they do because they are not in the same position of privilege, if that makes sense.
So my character is not a character who has any lines in this chapter because the character is dead, and that is Dobby,
Okay.
because he fought the system at every turn. He wanted to be a free elf. He went against his master's orders at great cost to his own health at times. And
Mm,
cheers to a real one, honestly.
yeah. Yeah, you're right.
And he died a free elf. So,
Hell yeah, you did.
And honestly, at some point, he really just freed himself. Let's just call it like it is. Harry did like a charitable thing, and I'm proud of our boy. But
I
Dobby
mean,
really just,
he was acting like a free elf before he was. Like, he was going and doing what he knew was right by helping Harry when he was, like, strictly forbade from doing anything of that sort. And it could have,
if
like, resulted in
anything,
his death.
if anything, Dobby manifested his freedom. Yeah, there, I said it.
There we go. Works for me.
All
How do we
right,
see
so
each other's politics in this series? No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, you mean the politics of oppression versus the politics of oppression?
I know.
Let's oppression Olympics. Here we go.
Who do you think is the most oppressed person in the series? No, I'm not gonna. I'm joking. So joking.
The most oppressed person in the series.
I know who the most depressed person in the series is. Does that count?
Is it me? Is it me? I'm just kidding.
No, it's
Um,
Harry.
I I feel like the most oppressed person probably Voldemort, obviously.
Oh yeah, no, he gets it. He has it real bad. Poor
Yeah,
guy.
he
I
has it
feel
real
for him.
bad. I mean, we kind of already talked about this, but like the entire world is built on oppression and invisible labor and
Right.
things that have been stolen from other magical beings, like a sword of Gryffindor. Or I mean, I know it was not technically stolen, but there's like their ideas of ownership is different than wizard idea of ownership.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I have complicated feelings, obviously, about like how the series treats other magical beings and promotes wizard supremacy. So
Fair.
yeah,
Yeah. There we go.
there we go. We've gotten to one of our favorite parts of the episode, which is where we talk about what we didn't like, our Dementors, and what we kind of liked or really liked, our chocolate. So let's talk about what we fucking hated this chapter first. What was your Dementor, Helene?
It was actually just something that really annoyed me. So you know how, like, back in, I think it was Order of the Phoenix, where, like, literally every other fucking sentence was Hermione reminding Harry and Ron that you can't apparate into Hogwarts. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And how I
Mm-hmm.
literally, like, wanted to fucking jump into the book and murder Hermione so that she would just stop saying those words in that order. I kind of got PTSD from that in this chapter, because literally, like, every other sentence was just a, like, nice little reminder sprinkled in that Harry's scar hurt. Literally every other sentence, it was like, oh, Harry's scar hurt, but he ignored it. Harry's scar hurt, but he had to push it aside. Or Harry's scar hurt, but he, like, tried not to touch his forehead. It was literally they said it like an average of like 60 times in this one chapter. I was, like, so annoyed by, like, the fifth or sixth time. I was like, okay, I get it. Harry's scar hurts. Let's just, how about at the beginning you just say, disclaimer, his scar's gonna hurt the whole chapter. Just, like, keep that in mind. Uh you don't have to remind me every other sentence.
Kind of like if I was saying like, Helene, I feel a migraine coming on, and then like every other sentence out of my mouth was like, my head is throbbing. My head is throbbing.
Yeah, oh, my head
I
hurts.
feel I feel the vein at the top of my forehead. Yes, I feel that my head's gonna split
Yeah.
open. Oh my
Yeah,
god,
it's
I have
like,
nauseous.
yeah, it's just like, it wasn't always narratively, like, relevant, and they literally could have just said, like, at the end he could have just said, like, throughout this entire interaction his scar hurt, but he pushed it to the back of his mind. Like, if they had just said that afterwards, I would have been like, okay, cool, his scar hurt, good to know. You don't have to remind me all the time. So I was very annoyed.
Okay, so my Dementor is not the same as yours, thankfully, because we cannot be the same all throughout this episode.
Right.
So
here are my thoughts on Ollivander. I wrote them down because I was like, I need to write them down as they come to me. It's like Ollivander was really milking it, wasn't he? Like, why couldn't he just come out and say, "Hey, here's what V Dog wanted to know. This is what I think he's after. I'm so sorry, but he tortured me." Like, LOL, just putting that out there.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
he
he kept going like, "What? How do you know?" Because
yeah, it
like Harry
was
kept like doing leading questions, and he's like, "Oh my god, how did you know?"
how could you possibly know about this? Yeah.
Like, no, just tell him.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a frustrating interaction to read.
Well, as Valentine's Day is approaching and our candy aisles are overflowing with the best of the stuff, chocolate, could you let us know what your chocolate was in this chapter? And do you have a real chocolate recommendation?
Yeah, so at the grocery store the other day, I went and got myself a large ass heart shaped box of assorted chocolates,
Ooh,
like you
ooh,
give your partner on Valentine's Day. I was like, I want one of these. I'm getting it for myself.
yeah.
And there are some in this where it's milk chocolate and that it is strawberry flavored nougat inside
Ooh, those
chocolate.
are my favorite.
It is divine. And thank God there were like 4 of them in that box. And I have been trying to savor them because I'm like, I don't want these. I want the whole box to be this.
Yeah,
They were great.
yeah,
They were very
I
good.
agree. Those actually are my favorite. Close second are the raspberry nougat ones. I don't know if that box has them.
No, yeah, it just has one of the nougats, and I think it's strawberry, but it could be raspberry. I don't, this one didn't actually come with like a descriptor
Oh,
of
I
what the
think,
things are.
yeah, yeah. But so some boxes come with like raspberry instead of strawberry, but some come with like both or either.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
it's delightful.
the delightful. The like vanilla cream ones are like a third favorite.
They didn't have them in this box. This box had like caramel, uh, truffle, like just regular chocolate truffle, and then like some like nut ones, which was
Oh,
fine, and then the strawberry ones. So it was a decent box, but those strawberry ones, like they should just sell those strawberry nougat chocolates like
just the
by
entire box.
themselves.
Yeah.
Just well, they should just like sell a bag of them. Like I just buy a whole bag of them. Like why don't they sell those?
Russell Stover has an actual like strawberry whipped heart that they sell at
Oh,
Walgreens.
I that did come up on my Instacart the other day, and so I have it in my cart for my next order. So I'm ready for that.
Yeah, it's it's very good. I'm just saying.
I'm excited.
Oh,
But in
I'm
terms of
excited for you.
the chocolate inside the chapter, Um, I went with I just kind of liked the vibe that Harry was giving in this chapter. Like he was very confident throughout this chapter, and it just kind of felt like a shift because when he's not questioning his own knowledge and leadership skills, like someone else is questioning them. Like Hermione or Ron is questioning them, or Dumbledore or Snape or whoever it is. But in this chapter, he was like, I fucking know what's going on. I know what I'm doing. I'm not gonna question myself. I'm not gonna let others question me. I'm just gonna fucking do my thing. And it was
Yeah.
kind of hot.
Wow. Wow.
Confidence is sexy.
Exploring exploring things that Helene loves. Strawberry nougat chocolate and confidence in Harry.
Yeah,
For you.
confidence in most people, honestly, unless it's like arrogant, you know.
I feel like a lot of times though, like the difference between confidence and arrogance, not a lot of times, sometimes might be in the eye of the beholder. Like if you like the person, you're like, they're confident. If
Yeah,
you don't like their person, you're like, that arrogant prick.
yeah, but in this case, I feel like Harry's confidence was really earned.
Oh
But
no, of
that's just
course.
me.
I'm not saying it's not earned. I'm just saying
Yeah.
there's sometimes how you feel about a person may
No, yeah.
color how you view them.
I get it. Makes sense.
Like sometimes when I don't like someone and I'm like, ugh, they're breathing, you know? Just
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
mine is a quote. And of course, we're going back to my boy Dobby. He felt that Dobby deserved just as a grand funeral, and yet here the elf lay between bushes in a roughly dug hole. I think we ought to say something, piped up Luna. I'll go first, shall I? And as everybody looked at her, she addressed the dead elf at the bottom of the grave. Thank you so much, Dobby, for rescuing me from that cellar. It's so unfair that you had to die when you were so good and brave. I'll always remember what you did for us. I hope you're happy now.
Yeah, this is where I cried in the chapter.
And of course, it's not like a milk chocolate, it's more like a
It's like a dark chocolate. It's
bittersweet
bittersweet.
chocolate,
Yeah.
it's very bittersweet, salty because of the tears, so it's like sea salt dark chocolate.
Yeah.
But it warmed my cold dead heart.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I just love how, like, she just, like, she's saying what everybody's thinking. That's
Yeah.
just so Luna. It's like, yeah, what she said wasn't like a huge revelation or like super insightful or whatever, but it's true. And someone needed to say it.
Yeah, sometimes you need the truth to come out like that.
Yeah.
All right, so last episode we didn't have a question because the chapter was such a bummer that we were like,
We
we're
need a
gonna
break.
we need to take a week off from the question.
Yeah.
But this episode, we actually have a question for you guys, and it's the following. So, in this series, we meet many magical beings, for example, mermaids, goblins, and house elves. We want to know, listeners, which magical being would you have liked to know more about and why?
Yeah. I mean, I know that the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, like, expands on some of these types of creatures, but we definitely don't know nearly as much about them as we do about witches and wizards. Um,
Yeah,
and
or
like
like,
they're,
is there like a short story you'd like to read about, like,
yeah.
I don't know, an intrepid goblin doing I don't know, some fun things.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Mermaids, what they think about witches and wizards, just stuff like that.
Hell yeah.
All right, Helene, we have come to the point where we have to wind down on the episode and talk about the media we've been consuming. So, what have you been consuming to keep yourself sane?
Well, I'm still trucking along on Game of Thrones. I will say that I think the show really hits its stride in season 3. Uh, but the fact that you have to suffer through two kind of pretty mediocre seasons to get there, that sucks. But now that I'm almost on season 4 actually at this point, and I'm liking it a lot better now. I just wish it didn't take 2 full seasons to get to that point where I liked it a bit more. Um, but
Okay.
I will say Daenerys is currently my favorite character, followed closely by Arya Stark. So that is where I'm at halfway through the season because I think there are eight seasons. Or halfway through the show because I think there are 8 seasons. Anyway,
Okay.
but then also the season 2 premiere of How I Met Your Father came out this week. The How I Met Your Mother remake with Hilary Duff, and I thoroughly enjoyed that episode. So I think that this season is going to be great, and they hinted at some really fun things down the road for that. So looking forward to that. And then that 90s show is out on Netflix. It is obviously like a spinoff of that 70s show, if you are aware of that show. I'm sure that we have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that 70s shows fans. And I watched the first episode. I haven't watched all of it, although I think the full season is on Netflix right now. I do plan to
Mm-hmm.
probably watch more. I just feel a little conflicted watching it because while I loved that 70s show and the first episode was really good, I just feel weird with the whole like Danny Masterson, the guy who played Stephen Hyde, and he's like, his rape trial. It's been like super, and he's like, they left him out of this new show, and his character isn't even mentioned. His character doesn't even like have anything to do with it. But Laura Prepon, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how you say her last name, who
Preppin.
plays Donna. Donna, who is a very main character, not only in that 70s show, but also in that 90s show, she's a main character. She not only is a Scientologist, which is very problematic in itself, but she also was a key witness on Danny Masterson's, like, in Danny Masterson's trial, who testified for him.
Yeah. I
And
can see why
so,
you're just, yeah. I
yeah,
don't know
it's
about
just,
hit her. I hadn't been keeping up so much with the Danny Masterson case because I was like, no, mm-mm.
yeah, I would
I
like to
hit
never
my
think about
gross
him again.
quota. I've hit my gross quota for the year,
Yeah.
So I didn't know that she had actually testified on his behalf.
Yeah, she did. And it's really problematic. And I would feel better watching the show if she wasn't a part of it. But I don't know. I'm struggling with it, like all people do when it comes to like deciding how you want to consume your media based on things that are happening in the real world. Because while Donna, she's in the first episode and she will be in future episodes of this new spinoff, she actually isn't like in every episode. So it's not like the show is dependent on her and her success or whatever. I just feel a little icky about it. But the first episode was
Understandably
good.
so.
So it's hard. Like
All right.
it's the whole thing of like having to separate art from the artist, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's difficult.
That it is. Indeed it is. So this month I ran out of Audible credits on my Audible subscription. Um And when that happens, I have to turn to the Audible Plus catalog, which means like you don't have to pay anything to access those. Those are just like freebies.
Okay.
And this is a freebie on the Audible catalog if you have, a credit subscription. So until the 29th, I am creditless. So I'll be dipping into that catalog. But I just finished an audiobook called Witches Get Stuff Done by Molly Harper.
That sounds great.
And it's a pretty enjoyable read. Slash listen. Paranormal romance, type stuff.
Okay. All right. All right.
I'm not gonna give it a lot away because if I give like giving out something away, it'd be like I gave out like basically half the plot already. So mostly like girl gets contacted by a long lost aunt that she didn't know anything about to come meet her and talk about the family after her mom passes away. It's very mysterious.
Okay. Well, I
And she
mean,
has to go to this island.
I wonder, is it just an audiobook? Because I wonder, because I have Kindle Unlimited. I wonder if I can get it on
It said
Kindle for
I
free.
think it said Audible or like only like on Audible. So
Okay.
it might be available on Kindle. It just means probably that the audiobook is only available on Audible.
Okay. I'll look into it. I'll look into it. I mean,
Yeah.
the title alone, like, has my
Yeah,
attention.
I know. So this is like the first book in what they're setting up clearly as a series, and it'll have like two more books because there are other like two other characters that then they'll have to like focus their story on. Kind of like a Bridgerton, but witchy.
Ooh, Witcherton.
Witcherton, but also they're not siblings. But yeah, we'll call it like that. Well, that's it for today's episode. Please join us next time as we talk about chapter 25 of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, titled Shell Cottage.
Yes, and if you've enjoyed this conversation, please take a second to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to us right now. It helps new listeners discover the podcast, and it makes us happy and fuzzy inside.
Also, it upholds the the witching world.
Yes, uphold the witcheriarchy. No, that's not a thing.
The witcheriarchy?
It's like matriarchy, but for witches.
Okay. Witchiarchy?
Witchiarchy. Well, that also sounds kind of weird, but you know what? Uphold the witchiarchy.
And until then, politics managed.
Support this show by going to patreon.com/acciopolitics. Our patrons keep this show going. You can find us online at acciopolitics.com, and we are at acciopolitics on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can email us your thoughts at info@acciopolitics.com. Leave us a voicemail at 915-996-1699. And you might just hear yourself on the podcast. Adriana Wilson is the founder and creative director of the podcast. Helene Karp is the producer and social media manager. Allison Pullman is the audio wizard and editor who makes us sound so good. Cover art and physical rewards are designed by Adriana Wilson. The views expressed by the hosts and guests are expressly their own and not representative of their employers or associates. Acciopolitics is part of the MuggleNet family of podcasts.